Out on a lesson. This is kind of just a continuation of it. But we talked about mind games and how that I think everybody faces that the devil just messes with your mind, right? And we have thoughts and struggles and it causes all kinds of problems. And then amongst the comments last week, in the comments I got afterwards, there was a lot of interest in how do we deal with this? How do we fix this problem? So we're going to try and just continue on with that thought. I would appreciate help this morning. I just be honest, this subject, I have talked to Renee endless hours over it, and I still am not sure that that I've got it straight. And so I would appreciate help on it. So we're not going to go through biblical scriptures per se this morning. We're just going to kind of deal with the problem. So we have this problem that, say in the church, every one of us probably from time to time are dealing with different things. We come into the church, the devil's messing with our mind. There's things we're dealing with. We're not really in the mood to worship. We're really not in the mood to be here. We're not really in the mood to fellowship. Does that hurt the church? No question. No question. It hurts the church. It hinders the church. It holds the church back. It is a problem. Now, are we ever going to get to the place in this life where we don't come into church with things bothering us? Never, right? That's never. We're never going to have a perfect life down here. So we're never going to be coming in not having these things in our head. And are we ever going to get to the place where we're so spiritual where the devil just can't touch us? I mean, I've just grown so close to the Lord, he just can't mess with my mind anymore, right? So we're going to be having problems in life, and we're going to be having the enemy blow it up in our minds as long as we're here. So I've got about 5 categories here to just kind of look at. So the comments came in last week of being able to share. So those are, again, just a little recap, those of you that weren't here. Comments were made last week along this line. Some said, basically, like when I come to church, I don't feel like I am able to share. I have to put on a smile, pretend like everything is good, and I'm not allowed to ever say that I'm not okay. Okay? We said that's a problem. That needs to be addressed. But we all know in church, all these things we're going to talk about, we all know that there is kind of that, this isn't a Sandhill thing, this is just a Christian thing. There is that kind of, you come in here and, you shouldn't be dealing with sin, you shouldn't be dealing with problems, you shouldn't be doing anything, you should just be praising the Lord and everything should be good. Isn't that kind of what the feeling you get from coming to church? That's what is expected of you when you come in. However, that is not healthy, and that is not really where we want to be as a church. So I'm just going to kind of go by categories. The point number one is just 5 categories of kind of how we share with each other, how we possibly, if you will, how we get over these issues. So offended at others. Anybody in here ever been offended at anybody inside the church? All right. Are you offended, Richard? Are you? Is anybody? I wasn't sure if he was offended or if he was passing out notes. Anybody need notes? Didn't get them? Did we get everybody covered? Don't have them? Raise your hand. All right, looks like we're good. So, Richard, you're not offended. Let's clarify. All right. But anybody ever come to church been offended? You felt like someone slighted you. You felt like someone said something. You felt like someone did something that you shouldn't do. They shouldn't have done to you. You were hurt. You were offended. You were mad. You were ticked off. Now, here's a question for everybody here. Have you ever come to church ticked off, mad, offended, put a smile on your face, give them a big hug, and pretend like everything's okay? Have you ever done that for months, years? Does that hurt the church? That does hurt the church, right? That's a problem. That's a problem. So what does the Bible say? I hope everybody knows what the Bible says. Are we supposed to go by the Bible? Yes, Kevin says. You have an ought against your brother, do what? Go to him and him alone. If he says, get out of my face, you jerk, then you go get 2 or 3 other people. You go say, can we resolve this issue? If he says, all of you get out of my face, then you bring him before the church and you say, we have a problem. We can't resolve it. And the congregation says, this is what needs to happen, and he says, go fly a kite. The Bible says you turn him out, and he's no longer recognized as a Christian. Now, I'm going to ask this question. How much would that just clarify everything in the church if we just did that? Right? I mean, that would just fix everything. But I've been in church for a long, long time. And I could probably count on one hand and have several fingers left over how many times I've seen that done. We don't do that, right? And I don't think that was news. I think everybody here knows that. I don't think they understand that's the right thing to do. But we don't do that. And there's probably several reasons we do that, but I would like to just address one. If I go to Sister So-and-so and say, you offended me, she is going to explode. And she's not going to speak to me for 3 weeks, and it's going to be ugly. Is that real? That's real. And so what do? I'll just let it fester for years and years and years and hurt the church. So how do we fix that problem? How do we fix that problem? How do we get to where we can deal with offense and hurts and not just cover it up and pretend like it's not there? No takers on that one? Christine? Okay, that's the biblical answer. But is that the real answer? Because I agree with Christine. Biblically, you should just say, you know what? I need to be bigger than to have my feelings hurt over this. And if you are mature enough to do that, I agree with Christine. I think if you can say, they slighted me, they did me wrong, they said something they shouldn't have, they just flat out did me wrong, and you're a big enough person to just say, I forgive them, and it doesn't even bother me. That's the biblical answer. But in my experience, almost everybody in church isn't that big. Most everybody in church is going to hold hard feelings, going to be hurt, going to puff up, and they're going to act different around them. Am I wrong, or am I not seeing this clearly? Or And so Christine's exactly right. That is what all of you mature people should do. But for everybody else that's here, how are we going to deal with this problem? How are we going to not let this hurt the church? Terry? Mm-hmm. 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 So Terry's talking about heaping coals of fire on their head, right? I heard someone say, kind of funny, but someone thought that was an expression of basically, God's going to pour his wrath on them. But that's actually not what that means. But there is biblical context for if someone does you wrong, you just love them to death. You just treat them so good that they can't hardly take it, right? Again, that's mature. That's a good biblical way to handle it. And this is how we should be handling it. And if you're a big enough person to just say, and there's nobody here that hadn't been done wrong. Amen? Is there anybody here to say, I've never been done wrong? I don't think that person exists. If you've been in church any time, you've been done wrong, right? And if you're here this morning, if you stick around, you'll get done wrong again, right? That's church, right? That's what church is. So there are a few of those people who can just say, I just ain't gonna let that bother me. I just not gonna let that bother me. But for all the rest of us, we've got to learn to get past someone did me wrong, someone did something I shouldn't have done, someone whatever. And if we can't get over it and let go of it, we really need to follow what this says. And again, I understand all the reasons why this doesn't get followed because of the reaction of the people. But is it okay Is it okay if someone comes to you trying to get things right and you get mad at them? No. Is it okay if 2 or 3 come to you and you get mad at them? It's not okay. Is it okay if you come for a church? Not okay. It's so much not okay that Jesus said you will no longer be looked at as a Christian. That's pretty stiff, right? That's pretty stiff. So hold that one in your mind. I don't want to waste all our time on one thing. Let's go on to sin struggles. Anyone in here ever struggle with sin? Never. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one then. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right. So I'm dealing with a sin in my life. How do I act when I come into the Sandhill church? Like everything's perfect, right? I don't struggle with sin. I don't have any problems. I just always am doing what's right. And again, we put on that false front, and I think some of that is, that's what this lesson is about. I think some of that is we're afraid to let someone know, you know what, I'm really struggling with sin. Because they'll look down on me and they'll think, I'm not a good Christian. So do good Christians at the Sandhill Church struggle with sin? Absolutely. Sometimes it's in our marriages. Sometimes it's in our anger. Sometimes it's in our pride. Sometimes it's in our lust. I mean, there's a long list of things. But we struggle with sin. And we cover it up and pretend like it's not there. Is there any value to having a church you go to where you can come in and you can say, I'm struggling with this? Is there? Now, I want to make sure and clarify this. If we get time, get down a lesson, but in case we don't get that far, I want to clarify this. There's some things not appropriate to be shared with the whole entire congregation. Okay? I don't know if you've ever been to one of those services, someone will just stand up and start confessing every sin they've ever done to the entire congregation. That's not appropriate, okay? So let me clarify that. But it is of an extreme benefit to have those who you can be real with. Amen? If you're a sister, you've got a group of sisters, or one sister. If you're a man, you've got a small group of men, 3 or 4 men, or one man, and you can just be real. You can just say, man, I am really struggling. So, ready for your shock faces. This is astonishing to me. The reason it's astonishing to me is not what you're going to think, but do you know how many men I have had come to me and tell me I'm struggling with pornography? I think it would blow everyone's mind if you knew how many people were. And what are we going to do with that? Throw them out of the church? Treat them like a heathen? Or help them? Now, don't we want to, I was very thankful that people could just be honest enough to say, Pastor, I'm really struggling with this sin, and I don't know how to stop. Isn't that the kind of church we want to be? Isn't that the kind of church we want to be? Where we can say, I got a problem. I get mad at home. I throw things. I punch the wall. I scream and yell. I rant and rave. I got a problem. But instead we want to pretend like that's not there and be fake. And I'm just trying to suggest that it is the solution to these mind games, the solution to the problems in the church, the solutions we have is being real as opposed to hiding it under a thing. So, again, another category, depression and discouragement. Anybody here ever been depressed? Anyone ever been discouraged? Is anybody can raise their hand and say, I've never been discouraged, I've never been depressed, right? I don't think anybody can say that. We've all had those times of depression and discouragement. Now, I understand that sometimes life really, really gets hard, but you know what else I understand? Sometimes because we're tired, sometimes because we're just too pushed, we're too stressed, sometimes because of hormones, sometimes because of a whole lot of things. Sometimes life just appears hopeless, doesn't it? It just seems like I've been there many, many times. It's just hopeless, right? Where we get depressed, we get discouraged. And what do we do when we come to church? Life is great, right? And again, I'm not suggesting that we come in and stand up in church and say, my life is miserable. I hate everybody. And I'm not suggesting that that's beneficial. But I am suggesting it would be a benefit to be able to have those people you could go to and say, Man, I've had a really bad week. I'm not doing good. I really don't want to be here. I don't feel like worshiping God. Are we allowed to say those things? Are we allowed to say that? Or are we just got to pretend like that's not real, right? Life problems. Long as we're living, we're going to have problems. They come in all shapes and sizes. They come in all different ways. But can I tell you, they come. And they will always come. They will always be here. Aren't you glad you come to Sunday school? Listen, guys, life is going to have problems. But sometimes, in some situations, the problems get the best of us. Don't they? Anybody ever get the best of you? I mean, have you ever said this? It just seems like it's one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. Anybody ever feel that way? Right? And it does kind of seem that way. It seems like, man, one thing happens and nothing happens and nothing happens, and you just can't get your head up, and life gets tough, and you've just been plowing through it all week long, and you come to church, and again, I'm doing great. I'm smiling. Everything's great. And I think these are very real scenarios that happen on a regular basis, and I'm suggesting, so many times we go out of here and we say, Renee, Josh, Jenny, whoever says this on a continual basis, man, it was hard singing. They didn't want to worship. They didn't look like they wanted to be here. It was hard. Preachers come to me and say, man, it was hard preaching. And nobody wanted to listen to me. Could it be? It's because this right here. We're dealing with life problems, depression, discouragement, mad at somebody, got sin in our life, and we come to church, put a smile on our face, and we don't want to be here, and we don't want to worship God. And I'm suggesting this hurts the church. Now, let's turn that around. It's bad for the singers to be up here singing and nobody wants to worship. It's bad for the preacher to be up here preaching and nobody wants to listen. But what about the sinner who comes in here looking for Jesus, and they look at a bunch of Christians who don't want to be here, and they leave out of here saying, man, that wasn't no fun at all. Now it's getting serious. What if someone dies and goes to hell and burns forever because we didn't do what we're supposed to do on this? Is anybody getting this? It's kind of important. It's kind of a big deal. And grief and sorrow. So, we're always going to be dealing with death. I know it's a terrible thing to say, but it's just true. We have several in church right now that are, that are going through the process of grieving and losing loved ones, and that's a very real thing. And here's the sad thing none of us wants to say. It's coming to all of us. Listen, if you live long enough, you're going to lose somebody you really, really love, really care about, right? And so grief and sorrow, and it doesn't even have to be death. It could just be, a severe, something severe you're going through, maybe, life-threatening disease or whatever. Again, is it okay to come to church and not be okay? Is that okay? Right? It is. Is there a benefit to, on all of these, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. We're going to try and get into that. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. But is there a benefit if whether you're grieving or you're going through sorrow or just it's just about got the best of it, is there a benefit to be able to talk to somebody? Now, I know we're all wired a little bit different, and everybody's not like me for sure. And I am very, very different, and Renee gets to be the person that has to suffer with this. But I'm just kind of wired in such a way that if something's bothering me, I don't feel better until I talk about it. Amen, Sister Renee? It may be 4, 5, 6 hours, but after I get through talking about it, I usually say, I feel really good. She usually feels terrible by that time, but I feel really good, right? But in all seriousness, I do think that most people aren't wired like me exactly, but I do think that there is keeping things in the dark, they never get better. Can I get an amen? And bringing it out, even to just one or two people, sometimes makes it look a lot different. You know how many times I've talked to Renee? Probably almost every time I've talked to Renee. And I've wrestled with something all week and just felt like throwing in the towel and quitting. And I would sit and tell her everything about it. And after I said it out loud, I thought, that's kind of stupid. That's kind of stupid. Now that I said it out loud, I was riding around thinking, I'm just going to quit. But now that I've said it out loud, I realized that was kind of dumb. Or she'll just tell me, that's just stupid, right? And so, but seriously, after you say it, after you get it out in the light, after you deal with it in the light, it sometimes looks very, very different, right? And so we hold these things in, and it really hurts the church, hurts us. And I won't ask you to raise your hand, but probably every one of us can raise our hand. Have you went through that time in your Christian life where because you were offended at someone, you were dealing with sin, you were depressed, had life problems, or you were grieving, and you went 6 months or a year, and you didn't feel close to the Lord? You weren't growing, getting anything out of the preaching. You're just going through the motions. I think all of us have been there. So removing the veneer, everybody knows what veneer is. Brother Ensel will explain it to you. Everybody know what veneer is, right? Just that little thin covering makes things look pretty underneath. Nothing but sawdust, right? nothing of value. But on the outside, it looks pretty, right? That's how church is so often. Letting others in. Are we able to do that? Are we able to do that? Just again, I'm not talking about confessing in front of the entire church. I'm just saying letting other people see I have a problem. Does pride enter into this? You know, I'm the pastor of the church, and I often think I'm supposed to be more spiritual than all of you guys and closer to God than all of you guys. And I often think I really shouldn't struggle. And when I have to sit down and be honest enough to say, I'm really struggling here with something, or I'm struggling with sin, or whatever, I would much rather just put my shoulders back and say, I ain't struggling with nothing, right? And I feel like often, if I do say that, I'm just admitting I'm not a good pastor. But there is harm done when we don't share with anybody. We have the accountability that we do with the brothers, Brother Tom. I've shared this before, but I look forward to that. I look forward to sitting down and telling Tom, I'm having a hard time. I am struggling. I have this area of my life I am not doing good in. And again, sometimes it's just getting it out in the light that makes it so much better. Everyone struggles. Is that true? Everyone struggles. I have never met a Christian that doesn't struggle. Some shape or fashion, everyone struggles. So let's stop faking it. So there's just that veneer that we put on. Everything's okay, and it's really not. So the failure in the church. This is what came up last Sunday in Sunday school. If you weren't here, the failure of the church. We have handled confrontations with anger. So that kind of goes back to the offended at someone. But a lot of times the reason those things aren't handled is because whenever someone is confronted, when there's, how do we deal with this? Then there's a big blow up and there's a big fight and they're mad. And guys, that needs to come to an end. Because if we can't deal with offense because we're getting mad, then we're literally holding the church back, right? To use shame, that has been the tactic of the church for probably hundreds of years and maybe thousands of years. But can I tell you as a pastor, I don't think that's the right approach. If a brother comes in and tells me, he's struggling in his marriage, if someone comes in and says, I'm struggling with anger, I'm struggling, whatever it is. Someone comes in and, what if this here? I've had this happen before. What if someone comes in and says, Pastor, I'm just going to be real honest with you. I don't like going to church. I don't have any desire to be here. I don't like church. Shouldn't I just say, you dirty, rotten dog? What is wrong with you? Or should we try to help them? But I think shame has been the tool we use. If you got whatever you're going through, whatever you share, we're just going to shame you. We're going to tell you you're a bad Christian. We're going to put you down. We're going to embarrass you. We're going to condemn you. And can I just say, that's not working. That's not working. And that's not the biblical approach to just shame people and make them. And that is the reason we have a veneer. Because I know if I'm real, I'm just going to be shamed, and everybody's going to look down on me, and everybody's going to, turn their back on me. And so we don't share because we're going to get shamed. We're still looking at failures of the church. So we get angry when we shouldn't. That's wrong. That's a failure of the church. We shame those who are real. That is wrong. That's a failure of the church. How about this? To promote putting up on a front. So what about this as a church if we just say everybody who comes in here should always be doing good at all times, and if you're not doing good, obviously there's something wrong with you. That's promoting. So if you're told that, what are you going to do? You're going to come in and pretend like everything's okay, right? You're going to fake it, right? So we're promoting putting on a false front. And what about this? I think this is the way a lot of people feel, and even at Sandhill, I think it's the way a lot of people feel. Good Christians don't get down. Is that what we think? Because that's kind of the vibe I've always got in church, is good Christians don't get. So if you're down, obviously you're not one of the good ones. If you're struggling, you're not one of the good ones. If you're not doing great and ready to just had the best week ever, you're obviously not a good Christian. So what do we all want to do? We want everyone to think I'm a good Christian, so I'm going to say like I have a great week, even though I really didn't, right? So we need to get past these things. So here's really where I wanted to get to kind of get to, and here's a place I honestly wonder if I'm wrong. I've asked Renee many times if I'm wrong on this, and this is I need some help. Okay, so everything we've talked about before, all the 5 categories of reasons for sharing, we have the veneer, all the failures of the church. Now let's turn the card around. Now I'm not going to someone and saying I'm struggling. Someone's coming to me and telling me they're struggling. Okay, so now you're on the receiving end. Are you following me? So you're not offended, you're not hurt, you're not struggling with sin, you're not in depression or grief. Someone is coming to you and saying, I'm not doing good at all. Okay? So now we're trying to figure out the goal of sharing. Why do we want to open up and be real with each other? And is the reason you would share, I won't use myself because I'm not a good example, is the reason you come to Renee, is the reason you'd come to, Brother Terry, is the reason you come to them and say, these things we've just talked about, is the reason you would do that, is that to get sympathy and pity? That's a really important question, guys. Nobody seems to want to shake their head yes or no. Twilene? Okay, so Twilene says it's not for pity, it's for to get better. Jenna? Mm-hmm. So don't raise your hand. The Lord gave me a wonderful wife who is doesn't really put up with me babying myself, okay? I was blessed with that. So when Gary's having a pity party, Renee doesn't jump in and say, you poor little thing. She usually smacks me 3 or 4 times and says, get out of it, right? That's Renee's gift. That's her spiritual gift, right? And in all seriousness, and I know all of you people here, especially Georgie, thinks my mama is just a saint. But you know what my mom has always been my entire life? I mean, when I was a little boy, till 58 years old, my mom had a real time. Son, suck it up and be a man. That's what my mom's always been. She has never, ever, I can remember 1,000 times going to her and saying, Mom, I'm really having a hard time. And she would say, son, it's really not that bad. Be a man. That's the way my mom's always done it. Maybe that's the reason I'm so calloused as I am. But back to what Jenna said. Have you ever had a pity party and really wanted some people to join you? I mean, I just want everybody to come to my house and tell me how bad Gary's got it and just pat me and say, you poor little thing, right? And I think that's very, very common in church because you've convinced yourself it's so bad. And as Jenna said, you go to someone and you say, I got this problem, I'm struggling with this, and they tell you, well, if you do this, you get better. No, that's not the answer I was looking for. And then you go talk to somebody else. And they say, if you do this, you get better. And you say, no, that's not the answer I was looking for. And then you go to someone else and they say, well, if you do this, you get better. No, that's not the answer I'm looking for. You know what you're looking for? Someone to say, keep doing what you're doing, and I'll feel sorry for you. And so, guys, I'm trying to be very, very, and if I'm wrong, I wish someone would disagree with me, because I've asked Renee this 1,000 times, and maybe it's because of my mama and Renee, but when people come to me, I typically try to say, let's figure out how to fix this. And in my experience, that's not well received. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I think most of the time someone says, help me, and I say, okay, let's do this. Nope. That's not what I'm looking for. Jenny?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, where you said you felt so much better once you finally told someone. It kind of depends on what someone's coming to you from. If they just need to be able to
Mm-hmm.
solution and get it out, you're not necessarily looking for a solution, so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you might just want to be quiet.
Right. Right.
There should be some discussion prior as to what you're looking for, because sometimes it's just a matter of getting it out of your head.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to talk to someone, not necessarily vent, but just explain the situation and how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, if it continues to be an issue and that doesn't solve it, then it's just solutions.
So very good point, Jenny says. So now we're still talking about the receiver. You're the person someone's coming to. You do need some discernment on what's going on here. You just need some discernment, because there are people, and I've had people come to me and just dump the truck out. Right? You know what I mean? I mean, they dumped the whole thing on me. You know what they said? I don't need direction. I don't need instruction. I just need to tell somebody. Fantastic. That's how I am. That's how I am often. I just need to just tell someone, this is what's going on. I don't need any instructions. I don't need any help. I don't need that. I just need to get it out of my mind. So there needs to be some discernment. And Jenny's right. If someone comes just wanting to tell you and you start giving them instructions, that's probably not going to be well received, right? So there is that. But there are people, so there's where discernment comes in. There are people who just need to get it off their chest. And there are some people like me who, once they get it off their chest, generally they start doing a lot better and things start getting straightened out. Because a lot of times it's just tangled up in my head, seriously. But there are people who, how many know what a cul-de-sac is? Do we know what a cul-de-sac is? Everybody know what a cul-de-sac is, right? It's a road that, that's where some people are at. There is no way out. They're just going in a circle. And they're never going to get out of there because they're just stuck in there. And they do need instructions. And so what about, back to Jenny's thing, what if someone needs instruction but doesn't think they need instruction, right? That puts you in a really bad place, right, Terry? Mm-hmm. 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 So Terry's talking about personal testimony, right? Is that a good thing to do? Absolutely, right? Someone's, we often say in the church, if you've been an alcoholic, if you've been through a divorce, if you've lost a spouse, you can, if you've had trouble with your kids, you can more readily help someone who's going through that same thing, right? So certainly there's a benefit to say, I've been where you're at, I've done what you've done, and I can help, relay my story to you, and that is a help. So here's kind of what I want to get to. We've kind of clarified we should be real. We've kind of clarified some of the reasons that we're not real and some of the failures of the church. When someone comes to us, I believe it should be to get better. And whether you're, offended at someone, whether you're struggling with sin, whether you're, depression, life problems, grief, whatever it is, the reason for sharing is to get better. And the whole thing we're talking about here is we want our church to be better. We want the services to be better. We want things not to be hindered and held back. And so how do we get better? And sometimes that's by letting someone give us counsel. Now, is there any, starting with the pastor, is there anyone in the church, starting with me, is there anyone who can say, I know everything, I don't need anyone to tell me? Right, that's a really dangerous place to be. I get there sometimes, but that's a prideful way to be. And sometimes I need someone to say, tell me what I'm not seeing. Tell me what's not there for me. But again, the goal should be, so this whole lesson, if this whole lesson you say, oh, I finally have permission, now I can just let everybody know how bad I've got it. You kind of missed the point. The point is we need to figure out how to get better. And if that is just sharing it and getting it out in the open, if that is receiving instructions, if that's receiving counsel, if that's just having a friend. I've told a lot of people, and I have some people that allow me to do this, but I've told, even a lot of people from other churches, I've said, if you're having a really bad day and life just, is just getting you down, and you want to just text me, call me, and just tell me how bad you got it, and I don't say anything back, do that. And they're just, life is just really bad right now. And then that, they're not asking for help. They just want to tell me how bad life is, And sometimes that is very beneficial, but we always ought to be trying to get better. We get angry at those who want to help because we don't want to get better. Now, I really honestly wish one of you guys would disagree with me or help me to understand, because I know I have my way of looking at it, and I would appreciate some help with this. But that's the conclusion I kind of have come up with. If someone comes in and says, I'm having this problem, this sin problem, I'm offended, whatever the problem is, they come to me and I say, well, let's look at it biblically and let's do this to get better. And they blow up and get mad at me and walk out and never come back. My wheels say they don't want to get better. That's my conclusion. Now, I could be wrong. And that might not be looking at that right. And I'm being very sincere. I could be wrong. But that's where Gary's mind goes. You obviously don't want help because the thing that will help you, you reject. If someone enlighten me on where I'm not looking at it, I've asked Renee this 1,000 times, and I really want to know if I'm being wrong, if I'm being, not looking at this right.
Mm-hmm. You blow them off, because in reality, you want to do what's already stuck in your head, and you just want approval from someone that you may look up to, being a pastor. Someone once would come to you, and their goal is, I want Pastor Gary to say that what I'm doing is what will blow you off, because they're searching for someone to say what you're doing.
I believe that's a bullseye. I believe that's a dead-on bullseye. So you're offended at Sister So-and-so, and you want to tell me how bad, and what you want me to say is, yes, she's a big problem. She needs to just leave a church. That's what you want me to say. What you don't want me to say is, yeah, you should go talk to her. Okay? If you're dealing with life problems, and I'm going to say, well, if we did this, we could probably help fix your life problems. you already have it lined up, and you're not coming to me for advice. You're coming to me to get me to agree with you. And Kevin is exactly right. And because you already have your mind up what you are going to do when I disagree with you, that's very offensive. And so that's a very real thing that I think he's exactly dead right on. Is that and I'm not trying to be harsh. I hope I'm not coming harsh. I'm trying to promote being real and getting it all out in the open. But I'm also trying to promote there's a reason for that. So we get better. So we get where God wants us to be. So we can put our problems behind us. And if the reason for sharing is not that, then I'm not sure it's a biblical sharing. Is that making sense? If it's just sharing to keep on being just like you are, that's not, that's not the purpose of sharing. But if sharing is to get better, and maybe the person receiving isn't doing a good job, that's very likely. But the goal has got to be of the church. Everyone is allowed to be real, and everybody should be real. But everybody is being real so they can get better. Right, Jenna? Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to first admit the fact that you're in the raw and ugly, and then if you do come and you're raw and ugly, you're going to be judged for it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can accept that and show that, then I think it will be easier for people to also accept and be like, it's okay
Mm-hmm.
to be that way.
So that's exactly, Jenna should just talk to Sunday school lesson. That's exactly where I want to see the church get to. Jenna is absolutely right. If you're struggling with sin, it's ugly. If you're mad at someone, it's ugly. If you're going through grief, if you're going through depression, if you're whatever it is, it's ugly. And if you're going to really be transparent, and I'm going to hear you, and I don't really want to use myself, if someone else in the church that's not a pastor is going to hear you, they're probably going to look at that and say, that is very ugly. Because that's what it is. We need to be mature enough to deal with the ugly, right? We need to be mature enough to say, instead of having this terrible look on our face and like, I can't believe, you just said that, we should be able to say, let's fix this. Let's do this. So if the goal is to get better, always the goal is to get better, and the goal is to be able to be real and really share our feelings and not be fake, if those are our goals, then those of us who are hearing the problems have to be mature enough to say, I'll help you with that. So maybe you look down on me as a pastor, but this is how I have tried my very best to do. Let's just use sin for instance. I said there have been many men that have come to me and said they struggle with porn. I've also had many people come to me and say my marriage is a mess. I've had people come to me struggling with, all kinds of really bad, and being very honest and open. Do you know when I come back out of the church service, I didn't sit here and think, oh, man, brother so-and-so is sitting there. I know how he is. I didn't think that way. I didn't say, well, sister so-and-so, she just shared her sins with me. I don't really want to worship with her. She's obviously not a good Christian. You know what I look at? I look at all of you just the same. If you've told me your great sins, I don't look at you. Because here's what I know. Most of those of you that didn't tell me, I know you got them too. So in other words, I'm not up here judging you or treating you different or cold shouldering you. If you come say, I'm discouraged, I'm down, I'm depressed, I'm having a really hard time, I don't come back in church and say, obviously you're not a good Christian. I don't look at you any different because I've just been doing this long enough to know that everybody's in this together. Some of us have better faces than others, but we're all in this together. So we don't judge each other. We don't look down on each other. Like Jenna said, it's ugly, it's raw, it's just dirty, it's nasty. We say, I want to help. And we don't condemn and throw stones and judge them. And I want us to have that kind of a church. I want us to have a church. So real quick, let's just try and go through these last things. I know some of you want to fill the last slots in. The solution, the church is a safe place when sharing anything. This ought to be a safe place to share anything. You are safe to be able to find your person, your 2 or 3 people, and be real and let them know, this is my problem. A small group or individuals you can be real with, I already said that. The here does what helps. So again, that's kind of the bottom line. We want to be the one who's helping things get better. And mature need to set the example. So what does that mean? That means if you set yourself up as mature, as Kevin said, someone comes to you because they look up to you, then you need to be mature enough to not treat them, be condescending or looking down at them because of their what they're sharing and everything. So I know we just barely skimmed the surface. I do appreciate your help. We're out of time, but I hope that will give us something to think about in the future. Let's be real. Let's do it for the purpose of getting better, and let's try and get some of these things out where the church cannot be hindered with it. The devil won't get a foothold in. Amen. Take a little break and we'll have church.